Hello and welcome to another episode of ToryTalks. I'm Sam. This is...
Hi, I'm Ian.
And today we are going to be discussing the media and the handling of the COVID-19 crisis. But first, because I'm excited, I want to do a little...
Have you got a show and tell for
Show
us?
and tell again, yeah. So sorry if you're listening to this on audio, but, you know, I have to share on the video podcast my latest purchase.
Jesus Christ.
So this is a Margaret Thatcher spitting image teapot. And look, it's almost the size of my head. She's a big girl. Look how big she is.
I think what people should learn from this is if they've got an old piece of political tat that they've been looking to get rid of for a while, just send it Sam's way and she'll give you some of her hard-earned cash for it. How much was it, Sam?
I'm not going to tell you because I can't remember.
Was it more than the Ronald Reagan one?
It was slightly more than the Ronald Reagan one. So now I've got Ronald Reagan and Maggie Thatcher, which now makes a matching pair. So the Ronald was a coffee pot. She is obviously a teapot, and she's beautiful. The only thing is her condition. There's a little bit of cracking on the glaze, so this isn't quite as good quality as I would have liked, but it's probably the best quality I could probably get because
This is probably the worst thing I've ever said about Margaret Thatcher, but her nose looks like an elephant's trunk.
Yeah, well, it's a teapot, so what do you expect?
Well, yeah, is it? I know. I thought it would have been funnier if the tea would have come out of the nostrils.
She's got a weird. This is the only thing that's weird about it. Is look, the connection is bizarre. The only thing weird about that, I've just realised what I've said. But yeah, so that's my Murray purchase, and she goes to my spitting image collection, and I love her a lot. So there's a lot of love going on in the house, and that is the latest thing that I love.
I don't do a lot of online purchasing, so this lockdown has been amazingly good for my bank balance. Because I don't tend to do online. I tend to be a bit of a browser, and all of a sudden I find myself wasting money in places. So this has been great. Considering I'm still working, this has been great because I've had nothing to spend my money on.
Yeah, I've saved a little bit of money, but I've also managed to make some purchases of things that I've wanted for some time, and this has given me the opportunity. Though I did walk away from a Winston Churchill teapot. Extremely rare teapot, but I have a limit. I have limited funds, so I had to walk away from it. It pained me, but I do have some form of self-control. I'm hoping something like that comes back because the Winston Churchill teapots are incredibly rare. But yeah, so I do have some form of self-control. I haven't sold
I'll take your word.
or something.
I'll take your word for that. I can see this starting into just a teapot collection of random political figures, and in 5 years' time, if we're still doing Tory Talks, you're going to have a shelf with them behind your head, and there's going to be like 50 teapots of varying different strange political figures. You could have a quiz where we could guess who they are.
You've literally picked out my idea this morning in my mind. So I was thinking, politicians love bookshelves. I was going to have a political memorabilia.
Bookshelf of politicians.
Yeah, bookshelf. So yeah, because there's a chess set that I really want as well. So I thought, once I build up a collection, I might do a section on my podcast, which is purely my collection and advice about anyone else who wants to buy it, what to look out for, the glaze. Yeah, so I think it's, it's not going to be successful. It's certainly not going to be popular, but I like to show this stuff off. But she is beautiful, but much bigger than I thought she would be. Okay, so moving on.
So the media, I think it would be good for you to give us your opinions, Sam. Let us, quite often I find that I may, with my booming voice, talk over you a little bit. So why don't I sit here in silence, try and listen to what you think of how they've handled the current crisis.
You've obviously listened to the feedback of our previous podcast.
maybe.
I'm only joking. Well, I don't think I keep it a secret, especially if you follow me on social media, about what my opinion is of the media. I, especially during this COVID-19 crisis, it is very apparent, even when it comes to the damage report every day, that the media is so desperate for the gotcha moment that they're losing all focus on what the public need from them right now. And I think that the public generally are losing trust in the media. It's a long time coming, quite frankly. And because we've got a growth of social media and that kind of stuff, I think the journalists and the media have to be incredibly careful that they're not going to be completely abandoned, I guess, from the public, because they need the public more than the public need them, because they've got alternative ways of receiving their news right now. And I think it's very telling during this crisis what the media are all about, and that is literally gotcha moment. Let's sell papers, let's have the headlines, and let's slam the government. And I think they are cheapening their craft as such in this time, and even the best journalists out there, trying to think of one right now but I can't, are becoming very tabloid trash, and so that is me holding back on my opinion of the media right now. How about you, Ian?
Well, I suppose I have a slightly different take on the media, maybe because I perhaps see it differently for what it actually is. See, I'm aware when I read a newspaper, read a comment on social media, watch something on television, that the organisation has got an aim, and whether that's to sell advertising space, to sell newspapers, to get people to watch their shows, whatever, they've got an aim, and that's what their aim is. Their job isn't to tell the truth. Their job isn't to the job is to tell the truth through their eyes. So I'm very well aware of how the different parts of the media represent different things and can represent it in a different way. So I tend to start off from a position of, when I'm reading a story, I tend to think, oh, this is going to be biased, this is going to be nonsense, this is going to look at it from one particular angle. But the one that's disappointed me most, really, I suppose, the media organisation that's different from that, and that's why I think I've always held them in high regard up until recently, is the BBC, because it doesn't have that mandate. It doesn't have to sell things. It doesn't have to provide adverts. It doesn't really matter how much anybody watches any of their programmes. Let's remember, this is why it was created. Some of the content that BBC creates for more niche groups in society, as it were, aren't designed for mass markets. They're designed for small, tiny little groups of society. So they shouldn't be trying to appeal to everyone, and they should be perhaps pitching themselves a little bit differently. I'm not surprised at the mainstream media, because that's what they do. It doesn't mean I like it, and I think it's right, but I'm not necessarily as surprised as everybody else by the mainstream media. But certainly, I think the BBC has not covered itself in glory at all during this crisis. But certainly, I don't think any of the media organisations are doing themselves any favours.
No, I think we're in agreement there. And I find it interesting that the likes of the Sun are putting out campaigns saying you need to buy our newspapers and keep it alive as such, is please buy newspapers. And I'm thinking they've missed the point entirely. Maybe people aren't buying newspapers because it's full of rubbish now. And also probably because there's no sport in it anymore. But this whole campaign, please buy our newspaper, please buy our newspaper. Well, why don't you start actually reporting the news, like the actual news, and then maybe I suppose,
Sam, we're from different generations slightly. So you're from a generation that's never bought a newspaper. I'm not saying you've never bought a newspaper, but in general, people only just in their 30s don't come from people that have a newspaper every day. You're used to getting your news in a different way. There's an awful lot of us, me included. I mean, I don't at the moment, but there's been several times during my life where I've regularly bought a newspaper, regularly read newspapers. I suppose I was perhaps brought up more on that being the way you get your news. So I suppose I'm well aware that if you've got certain types of views, you don't buy certain types of publications. So being a conservative, I'm not likely to buy if I was looking for a tabloid paper, I'm not likely to buy the Daily Mirror, because I know what's in there. So I suppose I'm more used to turning off automatically from certain sections of the press, because they'll be printing a narrative that I don't want. And I think that since the advent of social media and the lack of readership of newspapers, perhaps a lot of that nuance has gone, and perhaps people aren't so sure that, is the media's job to report the truth? Is that what they're there for? Or are they there to sell newspapers and make money for their shareholders? And that's the difference. So I know you're going to get an anti-government story in the likes of The Guardian and the
Independent
and the Mirror. But I've been surprised at the way some of the more balanced press and even some of the more right-wing press have been acting in this. And it almost, I posted something on Twitter yesterday. Actually, it was responding to Ash Sarkar, the one,
your mate.
Her, who I should not really respond to unless I want another Twitter pile on against me. But she posted something which she knew was false, and she knew it had been proven false by the time she posted it. But by the time I got on and commented on it, she'd had thousands of retweets and likes. You have to remember, they're not there to tell the truth. She's not your bastion of truth. And that's where I suppose that's the different parts that we're coming from. I dislike them as much as you, but I think most of them are doing a bloody good job for what they're actually paid to do, which is to draw attention to their publication. Now, love Ash Sarkar or hate Ash Sarkar, and I think you know my opinion, is that she's not who said she was ever supposed to be telling the truth? She works for a left-wing media organisation that's there to further their aims and their beliefs. She's not there to tell you the government are doing a great job. She's there to hold them to account. And yeah, that means that she might lie, bend the truth, whatever. But as much as I dislike that, that's what she's paid to do. So I suppose I'm a little bit different to you about it on that front, anyway.
Well, you mentioned a phrase I was going to bring up, and that is hold the government to account. And you hear this a lot with journalists, especially when they're challenged at the moment. Are you really key workers? Why are you out in the public when a lot of people aren't allowed in the real world? What is your purpose here? How are you? You're not saving any lives. You're not doing anything that's important. All you're doing is pumping out your own narrative. And they often say, we're holding the government to account. You have to do these daily things and include the press because we're holding you to account. If the press is coming out with false information, or as Trump always coins it, fake news, then are they really holding fake news?
From China.
China. Are they really holding the government to account? Or does it really matter what the government says or responds? They're still going to put out their own narrative anyway. So,
well, I don't disagree, but take the Target. Yesterday's Target, for example. Let's talk about that in two ways. Firstly, put aside for a moment the fact that it was wonderful to hit the target. Let's put that aside for one moment. Would that target have ever existed if we didn't have the type of media we've got in this country? I'm not defending it. At the moment, I think it's hateful, it's awful, and it will sound a little bit like I'm defending it. But in some way, it does do some good. If we didn't have the type of media that would attack and that would really, really press home how the government aren't doing their job, then Matt Hancock would never, ever, ever have made 100,000 tests by the end of April target, because he wouldn't have needed to, because everybody's being nice to him. Now, if he hadn't have made that target, we would never be at 100,000 by the end of April, because it's undoubted that target has galvanised people into getting results done. Now, it's a different story now whether you should need to have a target to get results, but undoubtedly having that target and knowing full well how much he'd have been absolutely castigated in the press if he hadn't have hit that target has meant that he's hit the target and in fact beaten it by 22%. So that, take away personal opinion, sit here and think, right, okay, what's that done? Well, the fact that we've got a bullying, baying media has actually helped us here because that's forced government to hit that target.
You've got a very good point there, and I do agree with you, which is an uncomfortable position for me. However, isn't that the job of the opposition to put pressure on the government to then make them respond, be better? This is why I always like a healthy opposition, because then it makes your government better. So isn't it the job of the Labour Party, our opposition, to put the pressure on in order for us to come up with targets and so on and so forth? It's not really the job of the press as such, it's the job of the opposition.
Well, it's the job of the country. It's not really the job of the opposition. The opposition just represent the country as opposition. But you have to remember the media do have a job to represent us as well. They are, and that's the difference. They are meant to represent public opinion because they're desperately trying to sell newspapers, so they don't want to come with a completely different opinion to the public, else they won't be successful. So yes, if you'd got a stronger opposition, you probably wouldn't need so many questions from the media. But let's not remember, we didn't have a strong opposition. Jury's out on Keir Starmer. He will provide a better opposition than Jeremy Corbyn, just due to the fact that he was the DPP. So he's quite good at forensically challenging people and things like that. But certainly with the media, let's not forget that really. And again, I've said this a lot ever since The Sun used to get criticised for its lurid headlines. The media only prints headlines and makes sensational headlines because that's what we need to buy it. If we weren't a society that demanded lurid headlines before we even bothered looking at a report, an article, or bought something off a shelf, then we wouldn't get lurid headlines. You don't have them in most other Western European democracies. Weirdly enough, Germany does have a tabloid press, but most other countries don't have a tabloid press similar to ours. Now, is that the press's fault or is that the public's fault? Because if the public didn't buy it or didn't read sensational headlines or didn't read the drivel, they wouldn't do it. They'd have to look for something else. So whose fault is it?
Well, no, and this is a question I was going to ask you, because I have a friend in America and we have been discussing the difference of reporting, like here in comparison to America with COVID-19, and his opinion, and I feel that that's shared, is our media is really fierce. And I don't think we would dare in government to say, I'm not speaking to you, like Sky or Channel 4. Let's pick on Channel 4 because I can't stand Channel 4. Still owe me £100, by the way, Channel 4. If we were to say, we're not talking to you, there would be outrage. We have to speak to all of the media. Whereas Trump can just say, CNN, fake news. I don't speak to CNN. I don't deal with CNN. And it's very weird, the difference there. But his opinion is that our media is really unfair on the government, and is really, really fierce, just really harassment, fierce, that kind of thing. And I just wondered why we tolerate it. Is that because we've got something in us that needs the drama, needs those headlines, and why also do we have such a short memory of the type of journalists and people in the media who have done such horrible things that the public have come out and been horrified with? And I'm thinking of Piers Morgan in particular. Why do we have such a short memory?
Just remember that as much as you say that people are horrified, and as much as you say that people react badly when the media do something wrong. So Piers Morgan, you're relating to the when he was in charge at the Mirror and all the scandal around phone hacking and everything like that. Let's not forget that at that particular time, when people like the Mirror and the Sun and the News of the World were hacking phones, the readership of these papers was millions and millions and millions per day. We absolutely lapped it up. As a public, we absolutely lapped it up. Let's not forget that at that particular time, there was celebrity magazines were selling millions of copies a week. Okay, and hello, it was a time when our thirst for knowledge of celebrity was massive. And again, if they did their first phone hack and printed it, and people weren't interested and didn't have massively good sales, they wouldn't have done it anymore. So whose fault is it really? Is it the public's fault for having such an appetite for lurid stories, or the media's fault for giving the public what they clearly wanted, else they wouldn't have sold anything? It's very easy afterwards for the public to sit there and say, oh, that nasty Piers Morgan. Oh, I mean, I don't like him, but that nasty Piers Morgan, that nasty Daily Mirror, that nasty News of the World. But at the time, the difference between the Sun and the Mirror, there's times going back to perhaps when I was in my 20s, where the Sun was read by 4 or 5 million people a day, and the Mirror was read by 2 or 3 million people a day. That's 7 or 8 million people a day were reading just 2 publications.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's like compared to today, but that's massive. That's huge. These were, they used to say that the Sun, whoever the Sun came out from an election won the election, and it used to have that much of difference. I disagree a bit with the American thing. I don't think our media is as fierce as they are in America, but what they aren't is we're not as partisan. So in America, you tend to watch certain types of news. So Fox News, very pro-Trump, very right-wing. If you're like that, you will only watch Fox News. So Trump won't go on CNN, or he never used to go on CNN. I don't know if he does anymore. But then Trump supporters won't watch CNN. So he doesn't care about not going on CNN because he knows that nobody that's going to vote for him is going to watch CNN. And it's getting like that a little bit in our country. So Conservatives don't go on Channel 4 now, and haven't done for a while. Don't need to. I don't necessarily. I do think our press is good at holding people to account, which is what they don't do in America as much. But just remember, I just think that the press is a reflection of what we as society want.
Yeah.
And whose fault is it? Ours or society's?
Yeah, and you are absolutely right. And I think those kind of things I feel quite disappointed in. I feel sometimes very disappointed in our society and the environment that we're in. I'm very disappointed that Piers Morgan seems to bounce back every time. Let's not also forget that he published fake photos of our armed forces to demonise them when they were, I'm obviously pro armed forces, I mention them all the time, but to demonise our soldiers who have gone to war to protect our country and to keep us safe. And
can I just
published that.
Can I just butt in and say that, because you just said repeat the line that you said. Piers Morgan did what?
He put out fake photos of our armed forces.
Yeah. To what? Why did you say he did that?
Demonise them. Okay.
So, and this is where the difference is. So I would say he put out fake pictures of our armed forces to sell newspapers. You will say he put out fake pictures of our armed forces to demonise our armed forces. And I say it's not. It was to sell newspapers. And did it sell newspapers? Yes, it sold newspapers, because you know what? The public wanted to read that, and the public wanted it. So, he's not great for giving the public. And it's whatever it was a lie. But I suppose the difference comes with why they're doing it. Which is why I'm disappointed so much in the BBC, because it has no mandate to actually get more readers, get more viewers, get anything. It just has to be a public service broadcaster. And I think it's quite illuminating and good that, as much as we don't think they've got their finger on the pulse, I think they have slightly listened to public reaction, in as much as for the first 2 weeks of these press conferences, every night it was Laura Koonsberg on from the BBC. The political editor, and there was a lot of clamour. Well, okay, so why haven't you got the health editor on? Because this is about health. And all of a sudden, it's Hugh Pym now. Personally, I don't rate him that much higher than her anyway.
I don't like him either.
but they have actually listened. They've got their health editor on because that's what it is.
They've also sorry.
I was going to say that they just seem. They seem to be, at the moment, want to be want things to go wrong so that they can say, look, we were right and you were wrong. And that's the problem at the moment. Whereas I think the big difference between us and certainly America, if America had made a target of 100,000 tests by a day and they hit it, I can tell you now that 90 to 95% of Americans would be congratulating whoever was the president or whoever was the government, and they'd be well pleased about it. They'd be saying it was an American achievement, and they'd all be waving their flags and saying how brilliant it was and taking politics out of it, because they know that lots of people have put in an effort. Whereas we just want to knock it. And up until yesterday, nobody had even mentioned the way the tests were counted. And they had been counted the same way all the while.
Yeah.
Now you've reached the test, they're just worried about how they've been counted, or we're testing the wrong type of people. And I don't think there's another country where the media wouldn't have been congratulating the country, not the government necessarily, the country, for pulling together and reaching that target. Whereas we just wanted them to fail so that we could turn around and say, you're crap, you're rubbish, you failed, who's next, kind of thing.
Yeah. Correct, but it's also been an interesting week, and I always say interesting when it's probably not, but it's been quite a busy week, and very little reporting has gone on, I feel. So we've had Aaron Banks won his case against the Electoral Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Crickets, silence in the media about that. I mean, there was a media storm and a half criticising the Brexit camp for all this wrongdoing. Apparently, he's proved that there wasn't anything going on. The Electoral Commission obviously lost again, and hardly anything has been mentioned in the media.
Most people won't be aware of it.
Exactly. Priti Patel. We all saw everything of this grand, display of, I'm resigning because I'm being bullied, and it was just weird. But it was
the big flounce out, you mean?
Everywhere of, I'm being bullied. We've had an investigation. She has been cleared of that. There has been no bullying going on, and silence.
So can I ask, Sam? That will be a quiz question in a couple of years' time. Name me the civil servant. Now I don't know. A starter for two. And name me the civil servant that made the allegations against Priti Patel.
I'm awful with names, so I don't even know your name.
Well, that's why I'm asking you.
I call my children 1 and 2 sometimes. I don't even remember their name. I'm not going to remember.
But there you go. But it is
outside a toilet.
I think that highlights it. It's yesterday's news. It's what they used to say. It was yesterday's chip paper or whatever. It's I think it was Sir Philip Rutnam or Sir Philip Putnam. I think it was Rutnam. I think.
Rutnam, yeah.
But yeah, that is a quiz. That is tomorrow's quiz question, because really, what he's had a man who's had quite a distinguished career and who's just failed miserably right towards the very end.
But what I'm saying is, have some balance. If you're going to make such a massive deal out of this being, because all people are going to remember is Priti Patel was accused of bullying. Priti Patel was a bully. They're not going to remember actually she was cleared.
The one thing I have surprised me most about the media as a whole in the last 2 or 3 years is the fact that usually they're quite good at reacting to public opinion, and they don't particularly. The Sun's a fine example. It will support, historically going back 20, 30 years, it will support any political party it thinks is going to win. So to appear to be on the winning side, and it will support Blair, it will support, and so on and so forth. Totally reinvent itself all the while. The media, we had the Euro elections where the media and the establishment, as it were all for Remain. They lost. We then had all the Brexit negotiations where everybody was trying to get us to go one way. We went another way. We then had the Boris election where I think pretty much all of the media were surprised at the level of the majority that Boris won. But none of the media have reinvented themselves. It's almost as though they're going into this with blinkers on. They were on the wrong side of the debate with the European question. They were on the wrong side of the debate with the Brexit argument in Parliament after that. They were on the wrong side of the debate with the election. They seem to be on the wrong side of the debate with this coronavirus. Absolutely. Because that does seem that the public are railing against them. Yet, And they're at a time where even if they're on the right side of the debate, we know with the rise of the internet, they're going to be losing viewers, listeners, watchers, all kinds of things. But they haven't changed their narrative at all. It's almost as though they want a self-destruct because they know they're not popular at the moment. They know there's a big article out this morning about how they've lost, how they're having to shave. So a lot of the big media organisations are shaving so much off their programming because they've lost so much revenue. But they've not made any effort to change. And I just think that this is the issue we have, is that, and I know we don't want to, it's not an us and them, but so much of this bubble of people that seem to live in central London seem to believe that the country is one thing when actually it's completely different. It is completely different. And there, you know, sometimes there is part of me that thinks that, you know, let's just put a wall up around London and leave it. It's like, Jesus Christ. 85% of the deaths or whatever it is of COVID, and 85% of the bloody idiots from the media are all there. So you might as well just keep them all in together. They're all welcome to each other.
What do you think is the future of the media then? Because it's a really interesting thing. We obviously want free press. We don't. I would feel incredibly uncomfortable with there being a great deal of control over what is printed because I believe in free press. But
can I just ask you, what do you think a free press is? Free for who?
Well, it's interesting because it goes along the kind of like freedom of speech. But I do believe that there should be no state control or limited state control over what is printed. Obviously, there is limitations when it comes to law and stuff like that. But free press, you know, within the legal confines. But again, it's not technically free, is it? But I don't think there should be much state control over it, but there needs to be something that puts measures in place to make sure that the public aren't being fooled. They aren't.
But that's just it, Sam. I don't think they are. If the public were being fooled, the public opinion wouldn't be so against it. If the public were being fooled, Brexit would never have been voted for. Boris would never have an 80-seat majority. And it's a really fine line because I agreed with everything you said just then, but that's the whole point. You can't legislate or do something about something just because they're saying something you don't like.
Yeah.
The whole point of having a free press is that they're quite often going to say things you don't like. Now, because the Conservatives have been in power now since 2010, that's 10 years. So pretty much everything is going to be anti-government because that's, I think, what they thought was going to happen and the way the country's going. But you can't say you want a free press. We just have. You want a free press, but you only want a free press if they're going to be on your side.
No, well, that's actually not what I said. But so what do you think?
But that's the inference of our whole thing. What we're talking about here, the whole subject that we're talking about is that, you know, we're criticising the media, but what we're doing is we're criticising because they've got a different opinion to us.
Well, no, I would like balance. So as soon as, and it goes back to, you know, when people were being accused after the Jimmy Savile scandal, every man and his dog seemed to be accused of something, and the media straight away, bang, you know, Cliff Richard did this, he's been accused of that. Headline news. And then when people are cleared, you know, same with this Priti Patel situation, when people have cleared their name, it is a tiny little thing on, you know, page 7 or whatever, and people always remember the accusation. They don't remember the fact that someone has cleared their name, and it can be incredibly damaging to people's futures, their careers, their families, because that's what the public, they see the headlines, you know, clickbait, and so that's all I'm asking, is there to be balance. If a target has been met, like it was yesterday, report that a target has been met. If Aaron Banks has won his case, report it, but report it as strongly as you reported the initial allegations. There has to be that kind of balance. That's all I'm asking for.
Yeah, well, I suppose, I understand, and I agree, but that then would involve, because what you've said would make a better, or would apparently make a better media, but I suppose it's really difficult because what you've just said there is control, is a level of control.
Yeah.
Oh, right, you can be in the media, but you've got to do what I'm saying, or you've got to follow these rules. And that is exactly what we're saying we don't want. It's really, really bad. The only way, see, my opinion is that the way we show that our displeasure towards them is by not buying the paper, or not having an online subscription, or not watching it on the TV. Not legislating against it, because if we don't buy the Guardian or the Mail or whatever paper, it will go out of business. I mean, it's as simple as that. When something loses support, how can it continue? And I think that that's what we should be doing, rather than perhaps protesting against the organisation. But just don't watch it, just don't listen to it, just don't read it, just don't buy the subscription, just don't give them fuel. Because the more people click on the link, and you and I are probably both guilty of it, but because we like a sensational headline as much as anybody else, even if we're going to be moaning about it, but we'll click on those links. You click on the link, I'll click on the link, and you and I both know that that's how they get paid. Now, you might be clicking on the link and reading it and going, but that doesn't matter to the person who's looking at the metrics behind the scene, who's just charging the advertiser who's buying the pay-per-click. So it doesn't matter if they're winding everybody up. They don't care. Local newspapers are a fine example. Everybody that comments on our local newspaper site comments because it takes so long to load stories. But that's because in the background, they're loading so many adverts. But we still choose to go on it and read the stories, even though we know we're doing it. The only way to rail against it is to not do it. So I think we've all got a responsibility that if we don't like something, let's stop. We all say we don't like the BBC. And I bet you our first go-to place for the news on the internet is the BBC.
Not me.
Is for me. Probably different age, but yeah, BBC. Their online reporting, I find, is wonderful. Because if you usually look at the name of the person that's done the online report, more often than not, it's somebody you've not heard of before, because it's a proper journalist trying to make their way and trying to make a name for themselves, which is what journalism always used to be about. You'd make your own way, you'd do some investigative stuff and whatever. Whereas now it's too easy for a gotcha moment. So a lot of the BBC content online is really, really good and engaging, and it's much more difficult to get across an opinion online, as an opinion piece as such. So I find a lot of their online content is really, really good. I find a lot of their TV content is absolute dross. But yeah, if we don't buy it, we don't watch it. They don't print it, do they?
Well, this is true. The other positive, and I think another reason why there's kind of this downfall of the media, is because we have the social media, but we also have access to information that we never had before. So the Panorama program that came out, that was lots of nurses and doctors complaining about PPE. Never watched it because I knew exactly what it was going to be like. Soon after, I think it was Guido Fawkes published, this nurse, Labour activist, this doctor, Labour activist. Boom, 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 boom. We probably wouldn't have had that 10 years ago. It doesn't take much to find out what someone's background is because of social media. So it's so much easier now to expose the media for being very left-leaning or whatever, because you've got information to the people that are on it. You see this with Question Time. As soon as someone's on Question Time now, within minutes of them asking a question, there is been a social media check. They've found out what their political persuasion is, and they are boom out there. This is the person. This is who they are. This is what their intention behind it. I think that's probably why we're questioning the media a lot more, which is a good thing, because we've got access to so much more information than a newspaper now. And so it's becoming quite telling of the media and their bias. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're turning off of it, because we've got access to a lot more information now than we did before.
I'm not too sure we are turning off from it, but yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, you used to get you'd get the same exposés, as it were, going back in the day as you do now, but they just take longer. So weirdly enough, if the Panorama programme had been out and it was out 30 years ago, you'd have probably found out that same information, but in about 6 weeks' time, and it would have somebody been writing into Point of View about it, rather than reading it the next day on Twitter. You'd have heard about it on Point of View, or somebody else would have made another story or a programme about this, exposing the Panorama thing, but that would have been months afterwards.
Yeah.
So you used to get it, but they just used to get it a lot later, whereas things are exposed a lot quicker now. And that's what I'm saying. That's the disappointing thing, because Panorama is a BBC programme, and some of the stuff that's come out since then about the fact that they contacted some communist union organizer to try and help them get the people for the show. Now, I've not got a problem with them interviewing who they want, but they should have stated these people are political activists. And then it gives everybody the opportunity to make up their own minds as to what their opinions are. Their opinions are no less valid because they're political activists with an opinion different to mine, and they're allowed to be on television. But perhaps they should have. It should have been there should have been balance, or it should have been a thing at the beginning of the story. This is who's writing it. This is what it is. And this is what. But I suppose a little bit. Part of me totally agrees with you, and then part of me thinks, do you know what? It's not. Is it the media at fault, or is it the public for being so goddamn thick? Because, I look at a report, read an article or whatever, and go into it thinking, right, okay, well, I'm going to need some balance here, so I'm going to need to look at another report or read something else. Is it the media's fault that people are so stupid that they believe everything they're told? No, of course it's not the media's fault. It's public's fault for being so bloody gullible. So there's part of me that says, this whole episode has been about, we want freedom of the press. We want the press to have the ability to say what they want. But then we've been criticising what they're saying. And that's the whole thing. I think the public... what premise I want people to take out of this is the fact that the public actually control the media, and the public just don't realise this. They control the media by reading, watching, changing. If you don't like it, don't buy, don't watch. And then the media will change because they'll have to, or they'll go out of business and somebody else will come up.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. And so that's why I don't go out of my way to read the Ipswich Star anymore.
I wondered how long it'd be before you got that dig in there. We do a number one local reporter.
He blocked me because he disagreed with me. And then unblocked me because he needs me.
But I think it is, and also, the fact that we're doing this, and we wouldn't have been able to do this a few years ago. It is a lot easier to get your own personal opinion out there now.
Correct.
So as much as the media is doing a lot of wrong and posting a lot of fake stuff and rubbish, it's a lot easier for the individual to get something out. Perhaps it's the difference now that perhaps the general public seem to be providing the balance rather than different media organisations.
And you can see that with the daily briefings, and now they've got questions from the public. I don't know if you watch the daily briefings, because I haven't been texting you the last couple of days to let you know the result, but they've had public questions, which I actually personally I think that's a 2 fingers up to the press, and I find it quite funny. Why are you stroking your screen?
Because because I was having problems with my Wi-Fi, and it kept flickering in and out, so I've just turned my mobile data on.
I thought you were becoming.
I wasn't stroking my screen. No.
I thought it was a bit like Face Off. Hello.
I don't know what Face Off is. Is that a film?
What are you talking about?
Oh, it is. That's got Nicolas Cage in.
Yes, and John Travolta.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
What is wrong with you? How are we even friends?
I don't watch films. I don't watch TV a lot. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe you should not rely on the media so much. Get out and about in real life.
Okay, well, that was an interesting talk, Ian, about the media. I've wanted to get some bits off my chest for quite a while, so I'm glad that we've done this eventually. And yes, thank you for listening as always, and we will see you again next week.
Yeah, thank you. And bear in mind that the more people that listen to things like this, that adds that balance to the whole media debate. So what you could say, Sam, is we're doing a public service.
Always a public service.
Thank you.
For us. All right, see you next week.
See you next time.
Hi all, thank you for watching the podcast. I've just added this to the end because since recording and before we've edited to put out on the Sunday, I have actually been on BBC Radio Suffolk. So there was an opinion piece put out, normally part of a call-in. I put a tweet out in response to the question of how I feel the government was handling the crisis, and my comments were along the lines of we should be asking how the media are handling the crisis. So I was asked if I would be able to speak about that on air. I've been on the Mark Murphy show quite a few times. It's normally part of the members of the public call-in. I'm normally on there for about a minute and then they go on to the next caller. That's kind of what I was expected this time round, but it was incredibly different this time round. It was the first time that I've ever been introduced as a Conservative politician. Politician I am not. I may have stood for a couple of elections, but I'm yet to win one. So I would consider myself to be a Conservative activist. I think that from the start, it led the listeners to believe that I was something I wasn't. The reason I'm adding this clip to the end of this particular podcast is because I think it's really important to highlight that even on a local level, the media may not necessarily be playing a fair game. So have a listen and let me know what you think. Bear in mind, I'm not media trained. I am not a spokesperson for the government. I am just an activist. So hopefully, under those circumstances and completely being unaware of what I was letting myself in for, I think I did okay. But the reason I'm adding this to the end is so that you can see firsthand how we're being treated by the media right now. So, as ever, thank you very much.
So we're asking in this little bit of the show, how do you think the government's handling the crisis? We're going to talk about butterflies and bins very shortly as well, and I'll make a difference update and plenty of shout-outs as well coming through today. But how do you feel the government has handled things at the moment? Susan's been in touch. Unprepared and too late getting started, as usual. Regardless of how we compare our death rate, it's awful. New infection rate is still too high to start lifting any restraints that we may have. Lots coming in on this one today, and this has just come in from Gail in Stowmarket. Listening to you on the radio at the moment. We flew into Heathrow Airport on Friday the 27th of March on a repatriation flight from Cuba. 3 flights amalgamated on a 747 which was full. A few days after lockdown here. We walked straight through the airport, not tested, not questioned, then put on buses to Gatwick because that is where our flight should have landed, and our car was there. It was quite scary, says Gail. So perhaps potentially that's one glaring omission where we perhaps could have tightened things up here in this country. Sam's on the line to us now, and a Conservative local politician, I feel I need to stress, because you are.
Yes, I am a Conservative activist, yes.
Yes, you are. And what do you think of the way the government is handling the crisis? Should we be holding them to account and asking questions, or just sitting back and taking the PR spiel?
I think it is good to ask questions. I believe in democracy, definitely. And so asking questions is a good thing. I think we do have to be mindful, though. I did comment on your tweet because the media has a massive part to play in this. We can't just look at things like the death toll and that's it compared to other countries.
Well, we're not just looking at that. We're not just looking at that. You listen to this programme, you watch the news. Mm-hmm. It's part of what's happening, and the death toll cannot be ignored. We have the highest number of deaths in a European country, and in the world, second only to the United States.
Well, yeah, I mean, the United States, I have a friend in the States, and the way they're handling it is completely different to us. But, you know, each country, it's not apples to apples. We're comparing things, our reporting of the deaths. We include care homes. A lot of the other European countries don't. I think the government has handled it as best as they can.
We were told, Sam, that to expect around 20,000 deaths, and that would be not an acceptable figure, but an understandable figure. We're now at 30,000 and rising. We are on the curve, 2 weeks behind Italy and ahead of them in the number of deaths. So we can argue about how statistics are gathered until the cows come home. The fact is 30,000 people have died in this country. 30,000 people. And could we have not done more? What about airports? You just heard me read the email out about Heathrow Airport. Could we not have locked those down?
Well, it's already been explained. I'm sure you, like I, watch the damage report every day. It was explained the circumstances around people coming into the country.
Well, you explain it because a lot of people don't watch. Come on. Why have other countries locked their airports down and put people into quarantine for 14 days when we say, in you come, doesn't matter where you've been, in you come, not a problem?
My frustration is that we are so focused on getting the gotcha moment that we're not actually looking at what's going on at the moment. We predicted, I think it's about 85% of the population in the UK are following the guidelines. That is way more than what was predicted. So we should all be congratulating ourselves with
You're
how
doing
well
what a politician does, and you're not answering my question. You're going off on your own agenda. So I'm asking you as a local. Now, hang on a second. We are playing a huge part in it, and I'll send you the emails of nice comments that we've had about what we're doing. The media has a job to do, and that is to scrutinise the government and to hold it to account. We haven't had an opposition up until very recently to do that. We will do today at Prime Minister's Questions.
Absolutely.
That will be fascinating. Why didn't we lock down airports? Straightforward question.
Well, because the scientists were suggesting that wouldn't have changed anything. At the end of the day, there is no cure to this right now.
Look at New Zealand. They closed down their airports. New Zealand closed down their airports. Mm-hmm. Anyone coming in, 14 days quarantine. And now
New Zealand is an incredibly different place, as you well know. They have way different procedures to we do. They're a far stricter country when it comes to people coming in and out of the country. They have completely different.
Okay, so the government did all right by letting everybody in and out. That's fine. Boris Johnson.
I think they're doing a very good job.
Boris Johnson shaking hands with everybody when we were being told to keep our distance and to wash our hands. Look what happened to the Prime Minister. Irresponsible.
I think at that time we knew what was going on. I wouldn't have done that personally. I don't think he sent the right message. So on that occasion, yes, I don't think he handled that position very well by saying I'm still continuing to shake people's hands because the science was already there. If
it wasn't for journalism shining a light on what's going on in our care homes, what do you think the numbers would be like now?
I disagree. I think the problem with the journalism that we've got at the moment is there's never any satisfaction. So if we've got there's no PPE, all of a sudden there
isn't in many cases.
We need lockdown. Then the government raises very difficult questions around domestic violence, looked after children. Now the media wants the lockdown to be lifted because they never thought of it.
I'm sorry, you're calling the media as some kind of homogenous thing. It's not. The media is not just this one thing over there that's anti the government. The media has a job to do in its many different forms. BBC Local Radio, BBC National Journalism, the newspapers, the East Anglian Daily Times. We all have a job as journalists. We're not some big lump that you can lump together and say the media this, the media that. I mean, that's a pathetic argument.
They have a massive responsibility because right now the public are very reliant on the media, and I think the public are turning on certain media outlets, not all of them, certain media outlets, they're turning away from them because they've realised that actually there is so much focus right now on that gotcha moment and not what's actually going on in this country. If we came together, and actually I'm going to say Keir Starmer, who is the opposition, has done a fantastic job right now of realising that you put party politics to one side for a minute for what's best for this country.
It's not about party politics. The journalism is not about party politics. The journalism is about asking questions. It's not. I mean, how dare you?
Asking the same question every single day and expecting different answers. You can't demand a lockdown and then when a lockdown happens, then start criticising the government.
Who is demanding it? Who is demanding it?
Every single media outlet that went onto the damage report was asking for this lockdown. We should be acting sooner. As soon as it happened, and then we as the government gave the information about, the negatives of this lockdown, the same media outlets that were saying we need to put a lockdown were the ones criticising the government and saying, well, what about domestic violence? of course that was going to come into play of the timing of the lockdown anyway.
Well, you're banging the party line, and you won't accept any criticism, which is really interesting.
I did with Boris Johnson. I think I absolutely did. But what my frustration is, as a human being, I've been in my home for 8 weeks now with my children,
and so are a lot of journalists working from home.
Yeah, well, yeah. But my frustration is that you have to a degree, trust the people that have more information than you. I don't say not question it at all, but we're missing massive opportunities here because there is just one line. Every day there's a theme, and we're missing stuff. We cannot compare ourselves to other countries. It's not like for like.
It's 30,000 confirmed deaths in this country, which is higher than Italy. We are now the sick man of Europe. That's 30,000 people. And as I said before, we can argue about statistics till the cows come home. But each and every one of those people is a person with a family. There are parents, there are grandparents, there are brothers and sisters, there are work colleagues, there are neighbours. 30,000 people have died. And we sit back and just accept what the government is saying all the while. We're doing our best. Well, did Matt Hancock really get 100,000 tests done last week? Is that 100,000 tests being done every single day? Or was that sending out tests to various people to say, well, we've got them all sent out? It's really important that we get the facts. And if it isn't for journalism, we just sit back and have to listen to what the government tell us and believe it. And sometimes, heaven forbid, hang on a second.
Any other country, given the amount of information that we are?
Sometimes, right, heaven forbid, the government aren't quite forthcoming. Remember duck houses and MPs' expenses. And you talk about journalism, and I will defend my profession till the cows come home. Absolutely.
Absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry, I've got a lot of respect for you. I do listen to your radio station. I think you are some of the better media outlets there. But you cannot honestly sit there and watch the damage report every single day and think that these certain journalists on there are doing a fantastic job.
By the damage report, you mean the Downing Street briefing, do you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, the Downing Street.
Let me tell you how it works. So ordinarily, when you have a press conference, very, very occasionally you see the press conference broadcast. So let's take Ipswich Town. So if Paul Lambert is up there having a press conference with Phil Ham from TWTD, the East Anglian Daily Times, Brenna Woolley, there'll be somebody there from the Mirror, there'll be possibly somebody there from television, and he'll say his bit, and then they will ask questions. And quite often they will ask the same questions that the other person has asked because they want to get it for their publication, for their newspaper, for their television, or for radio. There are slightly different nuances to how they take that clip, that chunk, that soundbite out, and then play that out on the 6 o'clock news on the telly, or on the 5 o'clock news here on BBC Radio Suffolk, or write it up for the East Anglian Daily Times. So what you're actually seeing is journalism in working as it normally does, but you don't normally see that. So if you don't like the Downing Street press conference, just watch the 6 o'clock news. You don't have to watch it. That's what the journalists are doing. They're getting their own angle for their own outlet and their own distribution.
But that's the problem I have, is their own angle. Right now, we are dealing with a pandemic. It's not that let's have an opinion on a type of footballer who may have had an affair. We're dealing with something very serious. And so I don't think that the journalists should be looking at an angle. I don't think journalists should be focusing on one word in particular that an MP has said because he's under or she's under incredible amount of stress right now, and then looking for that gotcha moment. It's really telling. They're after
different sound bites.
Doing a great job right
now.
Look
East, don't hang on a second. Look, I don't want to talk about Robert Peston. I'm not going to pick on individuals because I think that's unfair. You're the one that keeps talking about the media as a whole. So they are. Look East wouldn't run the same if they got a chance to talk to the Prime Minister in that Downing Street briefing. They wouldn't run the same bit of audio that the 6 o'clock news would do. They're different outlets, they're different formats. Radio 1's Newsbeat would be after something different that would appeal to the kids as opposed to what we would do. That's what they're doing. That's what a press conference is all about. It happens all the time, but you just don't, as a member of the public, get to see it, as we're doing now every day. And if you don't like it, don't watch it. Watch the 6 o'clock news on ITV or Sky or BBC, or read it in the paper. That's the choice you have. It's journalists doing their job.
Well, and again, just like you are saying that the government's not doing a very good job right now, I can say the media's not doing a very good job right now. The journalists aren't doing a very good job right now, because I think that, it's a stressful situation as it is, and this constant boom, boom, boom. I mean, we've seen it. There's been a lot of exposure about how they've wanted to get an angle, and then the people they've interviewed have been political activists. I'm actually glad that you said I'm a political activist straight away, because it's full disclosure of the facts. There is a lot of stuff.
So people from an opposition party are not allowed. So people from, you're referring to Panorama. So people from the opposition aren't allowed to have an opinion and aren't allowed to go on to programmes. So everybody has pretty much has an opinion. It should have been specified at the time. Really? They were there as medical professionals, not as whatever their political persuasion was. They were there as medical professionals, and there are probably quite a few people in the medical profession who are not fans of the Conservative Party, but they were there as medical professionals.
But
can you not see the difference?
It's very convenient to have a complete programme where all of them are Labour political activists.
No one from the government would comment on the programme. And I even asked Matt Hancock the day after on this programme, and he said, I haven't watched it. Yeah, right, OK, sure. Perhaps he didn't. No one from the government watched it or commented on it. And all that came out of it afterwards was Guido Fawkes suggesting that the only back that we had was, well, they're all from the Labour Party. No one actually answered the questions about do we count one glove as a pair of gloves, or a pair of gloves as a pair of gloves? All of that kind of stuff. No one answered it.
The BBC have also published that there was no PPE in specific hospitals, and then the government has responded with photographic evidence that the PPE had been delivered. Okay. And the person that had claimed that was a political activist. So there isn't just Panorama. There's been a lot of to and fro in. I'm glad that there are people on the opposition front bench who are working incredibly well alongside the government, but also taking them to task as well, because that's very important. And there's a respectful tone within the House. It's just a shame from my point of view.
Are you saying there wasn't a respectful tone yesterday in the confrontation between Matt Hancock and the Labour MP?
Well, I wasn't going to mention her because I was incredibly disappointed in that situation, because there are people like Keir Starmer who is doing a very good job of having that open debate, and then there are people that aren't necessarily. So I watched that clip a couple of times.
Well, let's play it. You tell me after hearing it again where she was not striking the right tone.
Does the Secretary of State acknowledge that many frontline workers feel that the government's lack of testing has cost lives and is responsible for many families being unnecessarily torn apart in grief?
Secretary of State. No, I don't, Mr. Speaker. I think that I welcome the Honourable Lady to her post as part of the Shadow Health Team. I think she might do well to take a leaf out of the Shadow Secretary of State's book in terms of tone. I'm afraid what she said is not true.
So? What was wrong with that? It sounded perfectly level-headed and no kind of shouty moments or anything like that to him?
It was a very emotive, we're talking about a very emotive subject anyway.
Of course she is. She's a frontline A&E doctor, quoting experiences from her colleagues.
Capacity, she's actually a Member of Parliament. So she's in there as a Member of Parliament. She's not asking the question as a frontline doctor. And so there has to be, there has to be separation there.
Really?
Also,
Dr. Dan Poulter, when he comes on here and says I'm a frontline doctor, so I should just say I'm sorry, Dan, that's not important. You're an MP.
If he was in the House, asking a question, the same question, I'd be saying the same thing. Dan Poulter, when he's in the House, is an MP. When he's doing his job or he's speaking on a professional level with that subject, then he is a doctor. She's in the House as an MP. She's using very emotive language. I've had a lot of discussion around this, obviously, this morning, being told by many men that it was sexist. I'm a woman. I do not think the fact that he used the word tone, and he only said tone. He didn't say watch your tone, which she's been misquoted as. She's actually shared it on her Twitter and has completely misquoted him on that because she's jumped on it. I'm very disappointed. I have a lot of respect for her. But on this occasion, I do not think that what he did was wrong.
OK. Sam, lovely to debate with you. Thank you very much.
Yep. All right.
Call us again.